Hello and welcome to this extra special episode of OurSport. Hi, I'm John, and I'm going to be doing all of the analysis today. And I'm going to be behind the camera editing and clipping up the video. If this is your first episode of OurSport, this is not our normal format. Usually my father's in front of the camera giving the analysis, and I'll come in every now and then with an anecdote or two. But today it's all me. It's all me. I get my own episode, finally. And so today we're going to be going over a variety of topics. A couple players I'm going to do some analysis on, and then we're going to talk a little bit about quarterbacks in general. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about Justin Fields, quarterback out of Ohio State. Now I'd like to note that while I'll be putting film up on the screen to back up what I'm saying, it's not going to be an in-depth film analysis where I go over specific plays like I did with Justin Herbert. I'm going to talk more in general about what I saw on film. I watched a lot of games that Ohio State played last year with Justin Herbert at quarterback. Justin Fields at quarterback. And here's a couple things I noticed. For one, they were the most talented football team in college football last year. Clemson had Isaiah Simmons and all those wide receivers and Travis Etienne. Nope. That Ohio State team was built by Urban Meyer, and my God, can you see it? They are ridiculous. That whole defense, Chase Young might be the best pass rusher to come out in 30 years. Jeff Okudah, not a singular person caught a ball on him in one-on-one coverage all year long. And Fields had a lot of help around him. And so the first word that comes to mind when talking about Justin Fields is unproven. He hasn't shown much about what he can do. Now, there are plenty of quarterbacks that play on great teams. Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, all these guys play with a lot of help around them. But there's a difference between them and Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't play that much competition. It's just the truth. If you look at the SEC, right, Tua and Burrow and who they're playing, you have a stout Florida team, a Georgia defense that is top 5 every year. They play each other, right? LSU played 5 top 10 teams last year. They played that epic Auburn defensive line, and they had a lot of games where they're playing, I wouldn't say like similar competition, but it's close enough where you get to see how Joe Burrow would perform in tighter competition. Right, how he performed when his wide receivers aren't wide open. And it's just not the same with Fields. I mean, they're killing Maryland and Rutgers, and you just don't get a lot from those kind of games, right? Whenever you see a high-level NFL throw, when Fields rolls out and sets his feet and fires a 50-yard bullet downfield, the guy's open by 10 yards. And if it's behind him, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so no one really cares. It was the same thing with Dwayne Haskins. And Dwayne Haskins is, I wouldn't say a bust yet. He's got potential still, but it's looking like he might be. We've heard some troublesome reports. It's still only 1 year, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's definitely, he needs more time. He needs more time to develop. That's for sure. You look at Wisconsin. That Wisconsin game, that was probably the best team they played all year in the regular season. Jonathan Taylor was doing the equivalent of beating his head into a brick wall over and over again, trying to run on that defense. He had like 20 rushes for 53 yards. It's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Their rematch in the Big Ten championship game was more contested. Taylor actually did some stuff in that game. He ran for a lot of yards. But in both of those games, that really good Wisconsin front seven got drilled. Dobbins ran for like 160 and 180 yards in those games. And when you have a dominant rusher like that every single game, it helps your pass game so much. So much opens up for Fields down the field because the whole defense is keying on J.K. Dobbins and his own running because Fields can run himself. The only really close game they had all last year was Clemson. They lost, so it's obviously a close game. And they kind of choked. I'll say that. They did kind of choke. Fields kind of choked a little bit in that game. The key point that really changed the momentum was Dobbins hurting his ankle. I don't know what the injury was. It was obviously hurting him. In, I think, the second quarter of the game, he rolled his ankle, and he actually went into the locker, but he came back. They got it taped up. It was the playoffs, right? He's not going to miss it. But he wasn't the same. He didn't have the burst. He didn't have the get up and go. And he kind of got stalemated after that. And then it was Fields. It was up to Fields to move the ball in that great Clemson defense. And they only scored one touchdown after Dobbins got hurt on an obvious mismatch when it was his best wide receiver against a safety. And he got open by like 5 yards on the post. It was wide open. I mean, I could have hit that pass. Probably not. But Fields hit it wide open, easy touchdown. Other than that, Fields didn't do that much after Dobbins got hurt. And with the game on the line, he threw an interception, which I will say was not his fault at all. If you go back and look at that, it was 100% Chris Olave's fault. He was supposed to be running a post, and by the time the ball leaves Fields' hands, he's open. He's going to cut in front of the safety, the same safety he just beat for that touchdown, by the way. He's going to cut in front of him. It's going to be an easy touchdown. And for some reason, he thinks it's a scramble drill. And he cuts the wrong way. He cuts back. And so instead of getting under the safety, no one's there to get under the safety, and it goes right to him. It wasn't Fields' fault. The ball was already out of his hands by the time Olave turned around. So there's nothing really he could have done about that. But he had plenty of other drives before that. They had a big lead. He really just had to hold it. Without a run game, it's difficult. But if he's going to be a top-tier prospect, you got to be able to win games like this where you're up with a great defense to help you. And he didn't. He didn't. But people have bad games. It happens. That Clemson defense is really tough, especially for a rookie. It's super complicated. They gave Tua fits in the championship game. Burrow took a quarter and a half to figure it out. You can't really judge him too harshly based on that game. So what can you judge him on? I mean, they didn't really have a close game the rest of the season. Their closest game was a 13-point victory over Wisconsin in the championship game on a rematch where Dobbins ran for 180 yards. Fields against Michigan. I didn't rewatch the Michigan game. As a Michigan fan, it's way too early in the morning to be crying like that. So I didn't go back and rewatch it. But he didn't play great in that game either. Michigan really got killed by a combination of Dobbins and their own mistakes. They got destroyed in that game. But Fields didn't carry that team. He wasn't the reason why Ohio State dominated almost any of their games. He could be great, but so far he's unproven. We really need another year. 12 more games of film or more, based on how Ohio State is. We need more film of him. When he lost a lot. Dobbins, Chase Young, Jeff Okudah, a lot of top-tier guys got lost to the NFL. Let's see how he does when he doesn't have a back getting 100 yards every game. When he doesn't have a defense that can stalemate top-tier running backs. And I really want to see more of him. But right now, if anyone gives you a definitive grade on Justin Fields, they're lying to you. If they say Justin Fields is a top 15 pick, they're wrong. He has not done anything to prove he is a top 15 pick other than be really talented out of high school. That's it. And play on a really good team. So despite his great stat line, he threw for like 41 touchdowns last year. I really have to say I'm not convinced by Fields. I think he could be great. It's just we have to see more. Moving on to the next guy, we're going to talk a little bit about Kenneth Murray. He was already drafted, so this is coming out after the draft. But we really haven't heard about any of these guys that got drafted because training camp is postponed and no one's gotten back to do anything. We really don't know any more about these guys from when they got drafted to now. So I think it's still viable to talk about these guys as if they've never come into the NFL before. So Kenneth Murray got drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers to try and help deal with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes and that high-powered Chiefs offense. He's not going to be able to do that just because no one really can. But I really like Murray. I think he's really good. He's an athletic freak of nature. He is 230 pounds, 6'1". He really doesn't look that big. Like, if you watch him on the field, he looks undersized, like he's Telvin Smith. He gets to the combine, sure enough, he's like 235 pounds, big guy, and then he ran really well for a linebacker. It's just he doesn't seem like a freak of nature because he's coming out in the same draft class at the same position as Isaiah Simmons, so he's not going to feel like a freak of nature when comparing him to somebody who's 6'4", 240 pounds, running a 4.39, obviously, just because no one can really compete with that. But he is a physical marvel. He is a physical specimen, don't get me wrong. And on that Oklahoma defense, the only real problem he had in college, but it is a pretty big problem, is missteps in the run game. Not really so much in the pass game. I thought he was fine in zone coverage a lot. In man-to-man, he'd get beat, but that's the same with almost any middle linebacker. You can't really expect them to cover a wide receiver. In zone coverage, he was fine. He rotated well. He would move with guys coming across from him, but overall, anchor his position. He read the quarterback's eyes. I thought he was good. He would really misread the run game a lot. Play action fooled him, which is really weird because reports from the Combine said that in the meeting rooms, if you don't know, at the Combine, players meet with almost every team in private and they do some work on the boards, right? Outside of the game, tell me what this offense is running, right? Look at this play, analyze this play. It gives the teams a good sense of their football IQ and what they're looking like up here. They do that at the Combine, and almost every team unanimously said that Kenneth Murray was the best player at the Combine on the boards. He was the best, which is weird because if he's the best on the boards, why is he taking missteps? And this is what I think is happening. I think he's overthinking. I think he's overthinking what the offense is doing, and he just needs to calm down. He just needs to settle down. He's going to get better coaching in the NFL. Oklahoma hired a new defensive coordinator last year who's really good, but you can't get the personalization and attention that you need in college, no matter how good your defensive coordinator is. College athletes are limited to 20 hours on their teams because they have college to do, right? They have school still. But NFL teams work 100 hours a week, NFL players. They work hard, nonstop. Their life is football. That's their job. They get paid millions of dollars to do it. And they have the best coaching staffs, the best equipment. And I think if you really get them in there with a good coach who can just tell them to settle down and teach them how to just calm down and read the offense, I think he can do it. He has the physical traits and tools to do it. He has long arms. That's really important for a linebacker to get off blocks. If guards ever get to the second level on him, he's going to have the ability to maybe get around them, right? Long arms are really important in the blocking game just because if you can get your hands on your opponent before they can get their hands on you, it's a really big deal. And keeping those guards away with length is a lot better than trying to take them head on because you're never going to win that. No matter how big and strong you are, even if you're Ray Lewis, a guard's going to be able to overpower you one-on-one. And so he's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got a lot of traits. My father at one point said that he didn't like Kenneth Murray just because he didn't make enough splash plays. He's a raw tackle guy on a bad defense that gets a lot funneled to him and gets a lot held up by Neville Gallimore, who's a really good defensive tackle that was going to go about second round. He slipped to the third and went to the Cowboys, my team, which is why I know a lot about him. But he was a really good defensive tackle, and he kind of opened up a lot for Kenneth Murray. And then Kenneth Murray might have had the Paul Plesnesley effect, who was a linebacker for the Jaguars, and he basically got a lot of tackles because the team around him was really bad. No one else would make tackles, so no one had more tackles 6 yards down the field than Paul Plesnesley. And so he thought Kenneth Murray was the same way. He doesn't make enough TFL, sacks, big plays, right? Like Patrick Queen. I completely disagree. Watching the film, he has a bunch of plays where he's pass rushing, getting past even tackles, right? He had a play against Baylor where he's chasing down the quarterback. He's like 10 yards behind him. He catches up to him, sacks him, and knocks him out of the game with a concussion, slams him to the ground. Big plays. He does make big plays. He's one of the few players on that Oklahoma defense that actually didn't play completely terrible like a 5-year-old child against LSU, that didn't just lie down and get steamrolled by Joe Burrow and his massive arms. He's one of the few players that didn't. I'm not saying he played great in that game, but he didn't play like my little brother, you know. So Kenneth Murray, I have a lot of hopes for. I think he can get into the Chargers, and he got to a pretty good team. The Chargers, despite the fact that they had, the number 6 overall pick, they got a lot of pieces. Herbert at quarterback, I already know my stance on him. He's good quarterback. I think it was a pretty fair pick at the number 6 overall spot. And then he's got some help in Keenan Allen and some other guys on defense like Casey Hayward. I think he really went to a team where it's not terrible. He's going to have some help around him, and that's really good. And I think he's got a really good coaching staff that can help coach him up and just teach him to settle down. Just stop spazzing out and stop overthinking and just trust his instincts a little more, and I think he'll do great in the NFL. And now we come to the third and final segment of this very special OurSport episode. And today we're going to be talking about quarterbacks and why they're judged so harshly, why they have to be Mr. Perfect off the field. They have to be suit and tie, buttoned up, why they have to be very presentable for your team, and why that matters. If you've ever listened to a press conference with a quarterback after the game, they have 8 dialogue options. It's the same thing every time. Unless it's a press conference with someone like Cam Newton, if it's Tom Brady or Russell Wilson or Drew Brees, the same responses. Well, I think we played really great as a team today, right? It was a hard loss. We fought hard, but we're going to get them next week. The same thing every time. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason. Because the quarterback is the CEO of your team. It's not the coach. It's not the owner. The most famous person on your team, the most recognizable, is almost always the quarterback. Bill Belichick, very recognizable. A lot of people know him. Much more people know Tom Brady. Sean Payton, some people know Sean Payton, right? Walking down the street, people would probably see him and notice him. Drew Brees, much more recognizable. And it's the same with almost any NFL team. He is the face of your franchise, and that's why they call it a franchise quarterback. And it's very important for your quarterback to be a good person off the field, as well as on the field. There are head cases all over the NFL, in the past and now. But if they play well, you can put up with it, right? Deion Sanders was a locker room diva. He didn't show up to practice sometimes, he'd skip out on film readings, but he could do that because he's Deion Sanders. And when it came to game time, he was prime time, and so he put up with his bullshit. Terrell Owens, very much so the same. Randy Moss, very much so the same. Off the field, had some issues, but on the field, played great, and so you put up with it. There are almost no NFL quarterbacks who have issues on the field, off the field, and play great on the field. There's just a much stronger correlation. I think it's because football at the quarterback position is more of a mental game than a physical one. Tom Brady proved that. He is one of the most unathletic people in the NFL, and he's the greatest football player of all time. It's just because he beats you up here. And when you're a head case off the field, it translates to being bad on the field, right? When you do very dumb stuff like eat a W or run from the cops, it kind of proves you have the mental capacity of a 5-year-old child who just got diagnosed with dyslexia. And so you kind of play like a 5-year-old child who just got diagnosed with dyslexia, like Jameis Winston or Baker Mayfield. When you go out and steal crab legs as a Heisman-winning quarterback and expected not to get recognized or caught, you're kind of not going to play like someone who makes rational decisions, because you don't make rational decisions. Decision-making at the quarterback position is much more important than any other position. And when you prove that you can't even make good decisions to save your life and have a good life, well, then you can't make good decisions on the field. And Jameis Winston proved that when he threw all of the interceptions last year. Oh, that looks like an interesting video. He threw every interception, and Baker Mayfield didn't have a great year either. Guys like Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel, right? Pretty talented guy. I mean, his running proved to not be sustainable in the NFL, but he still had a pretty good arm. If he fixed up his mechanics, he could be a lot more accurate than he was. The main problems with his accuracy came from his mechanics, and if he actually tried and put in a little bit of work, he had a lot of talent. His arm strength was there. I mean, you look at some of the ridiculous plays he made at Texas A&M, he's going off the back foot and he could throw it 50 yards. His ability to drive the ball wasn't as good. There's a difference between being able to throw the ball far and being able to get that tight spiral and drilling out. He didn't really have the arm strength to do that, but he could throw a ball like 60 yards down the field. He had enough talent to make it in the league. He just didn't have the will to work. And that stemmed from a lot of the bad decisions that he made off the field. It translated to being bad on the field. And that matters a lot at the quarterback position. Bad decision-making translates to bad decision-making. Who knew? And this is why quarterbacks are judged so harshly coming out of college. Every single little thing they do off the field, right? You steal a Big Mac from McDonald's, proof that you might not be good in the NFL. That seems like a huge stretch, but it's really not. We've seen time and time again, guys who have issues, even little things, right? A coach says they don't come in for extra time before extra practice. They've never seen them put in extra work, right? They steal some crab legs. Little things like that. It can translate to just not playing well, and it's almost exclusively for the quarterback position. And that's why we judge quarterbacks so harshly coming into the league. Finally, we come to an epic conclusion to this very epic episode of OurSport. I'm John. Usually it's not me in front of the camera. Usually it's my father. This is my own special episode all by myself. But if you want to see some of my father talk, who has a lot better opinions and knows more about football than me, subscribe down below. Click that notification bell so you can be notified every single time we upload, and you can see him talk a little bit more. If you like what you saw today, if you like my face, I know it's hard to like, but if you liked what I said, you can hit that like button down below. And if you have any other comments or suggestions, something you want us to cover, we are a very new channel, so we'll probably get to it. If you comment it down below, we'll almost certainly talk about it. If you want more contact with OurSport, we have our social media links down below, our Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail. There's plenty of other ways you can come into contact with more OurSport. And as always, have a nice day.